I'm begin our meeting. I understand we're being recorded. We have our council on internet, and we have a full board of 5 people in the full house. So it's a beautiful afternoon. So let's get going. First order of business for the June 14th, 2024 board meeting is the pledge of allegiance. You get to the point. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's what I got. Right now, I don't know who did that sentence.
Exactly. Okay. You recently got the minutes for the May meeting. Everybody had a chance to take a look? Any questions, comments? Have a motion to approve the May minutes? Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, first item of business today is old business. That's Krumholz 119 Sand Dune LLC with respect to that property. This is a continuation of a hearing that has been going on. I guess I'll let Wayne Bruin take the floor to tell us how discussions are going. And we've gotten a fair amount of materials with respect to the change plan.
Good afternoon, board members. Wayne Bruin, and Shay License Bruin on behalf of Krumholz 119 Sand Dune LLC. With us today is Richard Krumholz and principals, as well as architects. So this application has been moving. We've had hearings, we've heard comments on our clients and patiently listened to those, and then patiently listened to their experts, their architects, their engineers, their environmental consultants, and listen to the board's comments, our neighbors' comments, and went back in a sense to the drawing board. If you recall, at one of the earlier meetings, the primary objection that was raised had to do with the roof deck. And we tried to promptly respond to that and went back and reduced the roof deck substantially to a standard that this board had recognized previously to about 35% of the floor area, the roof area. Thereafter, at the meeting, we then heard new objections. We went back. The major objections in what was being offered was allegedly feasible alternatives. We received a set of floor plans prepared by one of the neighbors' representatives. And we also got a comment that we should consider a feasible alternative relocating the house to the south. After the board meeting, a couple of weeks later, after asking the neighbor, well, how far south? We got a number, which was 25 feet. So what we did is, like I said, we consulted our experts. We went back and to see what could be done, what was feasible. The other issue that was raised in this entire process was also the fact that the planning board had the authority to consider granting relief, like they've done in the past, automatically administrative relief or zoning relief or wetland permit was authorized. We went to the board on May 17th. The board, the village board, acting as the planning board, adopted a resolution which we provided you with a copy of. And essentially, they did two things. One, contrary to some of their prior practices, and I don't know why, but they decided to defer to this board on the granting of the front yard setback variances. But nonetheless, they approved the site plan as proposed. So everything we presented, they approved the site plan. So that we provided you with a copy of that. So we are here asking this board, in light of the fact that the village board, you know, they have the authority and they've done it in the past, to grant the minimal front yard setback relief administratively. We're asking this board for those variances. The other thing we had received comments about was the aesthetics. I know this board indicated last meeting that the aesthetics of the rear of the house, particularly the stairways and the walkways, is not something that's being considered by this board, but nonetheless, our clients went back and they did do a plan, which we shared with our neighbors, that we believe substantially changed and helps mitigate those issues with stairways. We provided you with a copy of those plans.
Is there anything you want me to be
No,
described?
not at the moment,
Thank you.
unless the board wants to look at them, and we can have our architects walk you through those. The other comments had to do with the length of the house and the setbacks into the front yard. And the comments that we heard had to do with aesthetics, notwithstanding that some of the visual pictures showed that the visual impact was actually, if you moved it back, particularly from the house to the northwest, that what you would see is the house being constructed immediately behind it on your views. So what views were involved in that regard, we're not sure how that was benefiting that party, but nonetheless, we went back and we considered, and also in consideration of the floor plans that were provided, our architects carefully looked at those. You know, they went to scale and stamped, and you know, they did look at those and trying to determine how it works with the entire structural components of how this house being reconstructed, because it's an existing house we're keeping, and how we're taking off the top floor and redistributing and trying to gain back those areas in this whole construction. So that could be done, and the suggestion from the neighbors is that the plan that they provided would somehow eliminate the need for the front yard variances. If we had engaged in that proposal. So we did consider that, and we did provide a plan. However, the architects, in looking at the plan closely and being reminded of the objectives here, when you talk about feasible alternatives, there are feasible alternatives to the applicant, not just possible alternatives, and they're not feasible alternatives to the neighbors. It's feasible to the applicant to meet their objectives. And so, being that we're trying to, and as this board acknowledged, I believe at the last meeting, that we're trying to do is reconstruct this house. And, you know, I'm going to digress a little bit here with the history, if you indulge me. But this house the existing house is a 3-story house, non-conforming 3-story house at grade, at a point that is at an elevation that doesn't comply with FEMA. The town did the last possible expansion. Any alteration or otherwise to this house requires compliance to FEMA. The FEMA zones are VE 16, where it sits. We're almost doubling the height just by complying with FEMA. The first thing we did in 2020 was put together a plan, which was submitted to the Town of Southampton Conservation Board, which is a prerequisite of coming here, to get a wetland permit to raise that 3-story house on piles with a reasonable expansion. However, during that time, what was pending, 1.5 years with the Town Conservation Board, with mitigation measures being considered and so on, this board had entertained similar applications and actually took a little different take on the ability of a landowner just to raise their existing structure. You required, among other things, that significant inquiry go into alternatives of reducing the height of the existing structure. So while we looked at those cases that you decided and what was involved, and listening to the building inspector, we went back to the drawing board and decided, rather than seeking a height variance at 49 feet and raising the existing structure, we would go back and take off the top floor, making it a conforming two-story dwelling, and redistribute that area. And everybody says, well, is it square foot per square foot? No, we were always looking for a reasonable expansion, but you also have to incorporate that into the existing floor plan and structure. And so that's what prompted this application. So rather than the height variance, and when we talk about feasible alternatives, that's an alternative we had to decide probably was not feasible for us to come to this board, and you would have been asking us to look at exactly what you see in front of you. In other words, don't come to us for a 49-foot height variance, which you denied short distances from us. Go back and see what you can do about this second or top floor area, which is what we did. So we made this application. And what involves is what, in my opinion, is minimal setback relief. The minimal relief for the roof deck railings and the other elements, and the minimal relief for the off-street parking that was all required to be relocated by the town environment division. Of course, this is, as this board understands, the task on this property, more so than most properties, is a tremendous balancing act. We spent significant time to get the wetland permits, and the mitigation sometimes gets overlooked by everybody that's involved there. And how much we have currently, there's no wetland protection or buffers. Marty Shea and the Environment Division required us to remove the existing driveway, provide significant buffer and landscaping to our north, as well as to the west, and you'll see it wraps around the front of the house as well. There were other elements, just to meet the groundwater level is very high here, and just to meet normal drainage and septic, involve fill and all sorts of things. They just go back several times to determine how to redistribute and minimize fill on the property. So this design doesn't come lightly. And we were able to obtain the resolution authorizing the wetland permit from the town with significant mitigation, including a new IA system, drainage structures, buffers, wetlands, replanted with native plantings. Significant portion of the property being buffer, almost half of the property. That being said, we also received the DEC permit. So we have the agencies involved with the environment, trying to protect the environment, basically understanding the balancing here and improving this plan. So that's part of the history. So when we go back and look at what forced us, well, we couldn't go west, we couldn't go north with this house. You can't go south because that pushes us also against the front yard. It also pushes us into a new FEMA zone, a new height issue. And it's pushing us south where the property is lower in elevation. So those things caused us for our modest addition to go to the east. And what we were talking about, our original proposal was a 67.1 foot setback from that east street line, and a 71 or whatever, 76.2 foot setback to the south, where 80 feet is required. So we were asking for a 3.8 and a 12.9 foot setback. And when you look at first substantiality part of the test, that's relatively minimal. But more importantly, when you're doing the substantiality, you're supposed to look at other factors here, which is what is the impact on the character of the neighborhood? What is the character of the neighborhood? We provided you, our experts provided you area photographs, analysis of the entire neighborhood. And what did we find is that our property, our proposal, not only is consistent in size, in floor area, lot coverage with practically every property in the neighborhood, but exceeds many of the setbacks, particular of the two properties immediately to our neighbor from the front yard. In fact, the zoning board, that would be the town zoning board, granted variances to the property to our north at 59 to allow setbacks of 21 feet for the garage, attached garage, and the swimming pool is 20-something feet. The house to our northwest, and I pointed out because these are the objectors, come to us with a setback for their house at 64 feet. And that's still less than what we're proposing. So what we're saying is that when you look at all the evidence and the facts here of the character of the neighborhood, it's clear that what was on the table previously not only is consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Nonetheless, we went back and looked at what the applicant, the objectors next to us asked us to do. And we looked at the floor plans, the architects looked at the entire construction of the house and how and where they could essentially shrink the length of the house. And they were able to do something where they shrunk approximately 4 feet, which is what we presented to you in this latest submission. Diminished it by 4 feet, which then in hand reduces the setback requirements that were previously what we were asking from the east 67.1 to now 71.2. So it's 8.8 feet, which is less than the 12.9 feet we asked for. And the other setback to the south was reduced from 76.2 to 77.2, so gained another foot there. So the relief that we're asking for the setback is in this revised plan that we submitted to you is further reduced and it's further minimized. What we pointed out is our proposal from day one is always complied to lot coverage. It's always complied with gross floor area. And we showed you in the evidence how we're consistent with the floor area of our neighbors. So we're not asking for anything different than what is happening or happened in the neighborhood or what is able to happen in the neighborhood. So part of our submission also, last time we had submitted the roof deck, and we're just reminding you of that. Roof deck is reduced. So there are 3 elements that we have put direct comments about and how, and we believe we made a reasonable attempt, and we believe this is a feasible alternative that meets the objectives of the clients. But we did study, for example, and Inner Science did an analysis on the neighbor to the northwest who had suggested verbally that we reduce this, or shift the house 25 feet to the south. And that was part of our submission. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but essentially one big element, and it's a significant element here, and I told you the history we had to do. Every time you change something, we got to go back to the town environment, we got to go back to the DEC, got to go back to the health department. And we would have to come back to this board because that shift would require more significant variances, front yard variances than what we were asking for. With what? No benefit. No benefit to us, all detriment to the applicant. There was nothing expressed as to how or where or what practically how that benefits any parties other than it's 25 feet more further apart, which is interesting. This was offered by our neighbor to the northwest. What's located in the northwest corner of our property is our pool and deck area, which is there. It's not gonna change. That's still gonna remain. So supposedly, the issues of potential noise and kids and pets running around, which we heard were issues about running up and down decks and whatever, will still be there, but we'll have to go back to Marty Shea. The relocation of the house goes into the buffer that they already designated. There's no increase in the wetland setback, just merely shifting it. There's no benefit of that. We would have to ask for new structures. The wood walkways that extend from the house to the pool would now have to be extended. There's structures there. We provided a whole list of the things, the issues, and why we don't believe it's feasible, including the fact that as soon as you go probably 1 to 2 feet to the south, if you look at where the zone between the VE 16 and the VE 17, it sort of goes on the diagonal. Our southeast corner of our house is pretty close. If you shift this 25 feet south, the property would be in the VE 17, requiring our first floor elevation to now increase by 1 foot. The house would have to be raised. We have heard comments, and we received an hour ago a planning report, which I don't believe was prepared by an architect or otherwise, and just had some diagrams of typical structures or whatever without dimensions, and commenting that this is feasible. Well, our architects, and they're prepared to testify as to why. And you're talking about a double cantilevered house being supported, and we're talking about an existing house, not a new house from the beginning, to be constructed, why it's necessary to keep the double things of steel that are there, whereas this planner is suggesting we could use some other method without any detail as to how it would apply, how it actually, whether it reviewed the architectural and engineering plans or otherwise. So that being said, but interestingly, we received also comments and letters, because one of the things our clients had done here, we tried to reach out to every neighbor. And every neighbor except for the two that are objecting, were willing to talk to our clients. Our 2 objectors immediately said, we'd rather not talk to you. We would rather have you talk to our attorneys. And that's been the discussion. Unfortunately, a lot gets lost in translation of that way with attorneys, and we all posture for the legal aspects of the sport. So therefore, we are where we are. But I need to say that as soon as this alternative, the neighbor, one of our neighbors to the south, who hadn't provided any input, felt necessary to put some input, where they said they have no objections to the plan as proposed, but if you were to move this 25 feet to the south, they would have objections. And I think people got a copy of that letter. I think it's 122 Sandy. So the other thing I would say is that what Inner Science had advised us is, this is like a house of cards, or the as soon as you pull one card out, everything can fall. The point is, this plan, as I said, is a balancing act, whereby if you move something over here, it's going to affect something else. And so as soon as you move things, what's not taken into account by the planner or otherwise is how you're going to do the drainage in the fill, which Marty Shea carefully reduced on this property and made us reduce. I noticed on the plan, the planner gave us just puts a box and puts the drainage in the lowest part of the property. Totally changes the driveway and everything else. And all of that needs to be engineered and otherwise. And I want to tell you, we've been through this for 4 years now. And we believe we balanced this. Our clients have been patient. They believe us, we've been patient with our clients as they have asked us to address these and help them understand. But what we've submitted, so we believe what we submitted, are revised plans that are feasible to the applicant, that hopefully address the concerns and help minimize. Can't say it's 100%. I don't think any of the parties here will get 100% of what they want. The other thing I want to say is that I submitted a memo in light of the revised plans that follows our petition and addresses the 5 parkettes. And at that point, and it's not necessarily new information. I think I summarized a little bit of the history in my comments that I just summarized. And that's part of the record. So I am available if you have any questions. I want to note that, interestingly, we have some of the comments we received, particularly the landowner to the northwest, has been an interesting process, because notwithstanding we were told to talk to the attorneys, not shortly after that, our clients received a personal invitation to come visit the property because it was being sold. It's on the market to be sold, and the brokers had personally invited them to come inspect the property. So we're not sure how or where or what's going on there, but these are some of the things, and our clients have been at their wits' ends how to address some of these issues. But we believe at this point, and we would hope the board would agree that we've heard appropriate comments. We believe we provided you with evidence demonstrating we're entitled to variances. They're not substantial, and they're driven by the competing interests here, wetlands and their zoning primarily, and some other factors. So I don't know if you have any questions of us or the architects at this point. If you want to hear from our architects, they could address the issue of the steel girders if you want, or anything else with the plans.
I think for the moment, anybody have any questions for Mr. Groom? Since we have other people who I think will speak here, let's hear other points of view, and then we'll reserve our questions after we've heard. Anyone else?
Excuse me, Mike, I'm having a problem, so if I may, I'm gonna shut down and
Sure.
reboot. And this has to do with the recording.
Okay,